Good morning. Today is Monday, May 1st, 2023. Everyone who experiences the death of a loved one grieves and mourns differently and at their own pace. And we hope that that person gradually reaches the point where the memory of their loved one is not only painful, but balanced with the feeling of blessing of having that person in their life. We hope that a person will reach nechama. The word nechama, we normally translate it as consolation. But a number of commentators draw a more precise meaning of the word based on the first place in the Torah a form of that word is used, and it occurs early in the Torah. At the end of the first Torah portion, the end of the Parsha Bereshis, it's the passage where God decides to bring the Mabul, to bring the flood, to wash the world clean, and start over with Noach and his family. And it is a very difficult passage to understand. Torah says as follows. It's the last paragraph of the Parsha Bereshis before the Parsha of Noach. Vayar Hashem, and God saw, ki rabba ra'as ha'adam ba'aretz, that the evil of mankind was great in the land, in the world. V'chol yetzer machshavos libo rak ra kol hayom. And the impulse of people was wicked, was to do bad things all the time. Vayinachem Hashem. Here's that word related to the word nechama, but normally we would translate it as in this verse as Vayinachem Hashem, and God regretted ki asa es ha'adam ba'aretz, that God had created mankind in the earth. Vayisatsev el libo, and God was depressed in God's heart. Vayomer Hashem, and God said, Emcha es ha'adam asher barasi mi'al pnei ha'adama, I will destroy humankind, which I created. I will destroy humankind from the face of the earth. Me adam ad behema, ad remes, vad ofa shemayim. Human beings, animals, insects, birds. Ki nichamti ki asisim. I, again that word nechama, we usually translate it as regret that I made them. V'Noach matza chen b'nei Hashem. And Noah, found favor in the eyes of God. Now, this passage is so difficult to understand. First of all, how is it possible to talk about God, Vayinachem Hashem, and God regretted? I mean, just our understanding of God does not encompass an ability to comprehend what that word might mean. And the next phrase, Vayis atsev el libo, God was depressed in his heart. I mean, how is it even possible to use these words in connection with God? It's very, very difficult to understand, and I don't claim to be able to understand it. I don't understand it. But several commentators provide the following assistance. And that is the word vayinachem, or nechama, which we translate in this context as regret, more precisely means vayinachem, a change in perspective. God went through a change in perspective. We might say God moved from plan A to plan B. In other words, God created the world with a certain set of expectations based on a certain reality. And then, at this point, God changes perspective. God decides on a plan B with a different reality and a different set of expectations. I don't claim that I understand that. I'm just sharing how some commentators try to grapple with this passage. But if we take that in a very different context, this is what we mean by the process of nechama, of consolation. In other words, the loss will always be there, and it will always be painful. It will never go away. But over time, we hope that a person will reach a change in perspective from feeling sharp pain exclusively. Often that's related to the end, near the end of their loved one's life. A change to gradually, over time, to a fuller view of the beauty and the blessing of their life, to be able to remember the joy, to be able to laugh at the foibles, and to not feel guilty to experience happiness, alongside the emptiness of the loss. That's the process that we hope a person will go through in the aftermath of a devastating loss, the process of nechama. So I have an observation. It is purely anecdotal. I've never seen or heard anyone else express this. It's just my own observation. And there are many exceptions in both directions to what I'm going to share. But in general, my observation is that people who say Kaddish for someone they love who has died have a smoother process of nechama than those who, for whatever reason, do not say Kaddish. Again, exceptions on both sides. This is certainly not the only factor, and there are many layers to understanding it, but in general, it's an observation that I see and I feel exists. So, I want to explore with you the role that saying Kaddish for a mourner can fill in the process of mourning and ultimately reaching nechama, consolation. So for today, I just want to share one layer of this with several more layers to come later on. The earliest source we have that Kaddish is a prayer for mourners is attributed to Rabbi Akiva. It's interesting that the attribution is a little cloudy in the sense that, of course, Rabbi Akiva is quoted hundreds of times in the Mishnah and the Talmud, but this particular attribution is not mentioned anywhere in the Talmud. The earliest attribution that Rabbi Akiva is the one who said this only occurs hundreds of years after Rabbi Akiva died. So again, the attribution is somewhat cloudy, but tradition has it that Rabbi Akiva expressed that a person who has suffered a loss, a mourner, should say the Kaddish prayer as a schus, as a merit to help for the kapara, the atonement of the parent who passed away, God forbid. In other words, when a person's life comes to an end, their neshama, their soul comes before God. We are judged by God. We are rewarded for our mitzvos, held accountable for our mistakes, and there is a process where we, the mourner, can do something to help the neshama of the departed be able to achieve this kapara, this atonement, this forgiveness from God, through the merit of saying Kaddish. That's the statement that Rabbi Akiva makes, and that's the earliest origin of associating Kaddish with mourners. When a person, God forbid, loses a parent, the practice is they say Kaddish for 11 months. Why 11 months? The reason is because when a person, God forbid, loses a parent, there is a period of mourning, avelus, mourning, for 12 months. It's in stages. The first 7 days, the first 30 days, and the first 12 months, the first year. So the mourning period is for 12 months. If a person, and so the practices of mourning, of not going to musical events or entertainment or other sorts of limitations that we practice during mourning, that's 12 months. If a person were to say Kaddish for that entire 12-month period, which would seem to make sense on the surface, it would seem to convey the message that my parent, God forbid, was a rasha, was wicked, requires my effort to bring kapara, atonement, through my merits, and therefore I'm saying Kaddish for 12 months. God forbid. We don't want to ever suggest that a person's parent was wicked, was evil, and is in this category. So we say Kaddish for 11 months. There are some different customs between Ashkenazim and Sephardim, but they all generally amount to the same thing. We say Kaddish a little bit less than 12 months in order to say, yes, I want my merit to benefit the neshama, the soul of my parent, but I don't want to imply that, God forbid, there was something negative that they need atonement for. Okay. For other relatives, other than a parent, the mourning period is 30 days, and the practice of saying Kaddish is the same 30 days. But one basic idea that comes from Rabbi Akiva and his connection of Kaddish to mourning is that I, the child, I can do something for my parent after they pass away that helps them. And that can be tremendously empowering and comforting. So let me share my personal story. My father passed away on Hanukkah 2011. It was about 10 years after we moved to Montreal. Before moving to Montreal, we lived in New Haven, Connecticut. My father was living in New York. New Haven is we're about an hour and a half, less than 2 hours drive from our house to my father's house. My father had been sick, quite sick, for about the last 15 years of his life. And so living in New York, living in Connecticut, in those years, I was able to visit him quite often. Every couple of weeks or so, I would be able to go in and to spend time with my father. When we moved here, 2001, it was a great move for us, thank God, a blessing to be able to be here. Now, coming into 22 years almost. But it meant that I was farther away from my father, who was in New York, and I did not see him as often. From the time that we came here, my father was never well enough to be able to come here to visit us. And I also was unable to visit him nearly as much as when I was living closer. When my father passed away, I felt very bad that I had not done as much for him as I should have in the last 10 years of his life. And when I was saying Kaddish, it was very powerful to me that I was helping him, that I was doing something for him in a way that I was not able to do for him while he was alive. And I think, for myself, and what I see in many others, I think that this is a large part of how Kaddish helps a mourner to cope and to lead to nechama, to consolation. However, I must confess to you, for me, and again, everyone is different, but for me, though Kaddish leads towards nechama, today, 11 years later, I am still not fully there yet. My friends, I wish you a great day, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.